الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So the sessions will continue on Wednesdays at 7 until the week right before Ramadan, the Wednesday right before Ramadan. There will be one extra session that will be on March 3rd. It will be a Sunday. It will be at 5, and I'll put that out inshallah in the Google Classroom. There will be one extra session that will be on March 3rd, the first Sunday in March at 5 o'clock. That's the only extra session that will run for this course, and the only reason that I'm doing it is because we only ended up having 9 weeks prior to Ramadan, we need 10 weeks to finish any course within the IDA. So we're going to take that one extra session, inshallah, for it. We did run this Sunday and that wasn't an extra session, that was to make up for the Wednesday before because I was away. But I'm here, inshallah, for the rest of until the end of this semester. So we'll be running every Wednesday with that one Sunday at the beginning of March. That will be extra, inshallah ta'ala. And if you're in the Google Classroom, you'll see all the announcements for it, so it won't be difficult to follow, inshallah ta'ala. So today we're going to do hadith number 9 and hadith number 10, inshallah ta'ala. Those of you who did not attend last session should go back and listen to it, because I did talk about an assignment, and I covered an important piece within this course. We talked a little bit about Doctor, is it supposed to be in the middle or PowerPoint? Okay, there we go. So I did talk about this method of hadith narrating, and it's important because the first assignment is going to be based on this. I'm going to ask you to narrate a hadith appropriately. You should learn how to narrate a hadith, and there are 4 components. There are 5, but we're going to stick to 4 for the purpose of this course. When you narrate a hadith, you don't need to do that when you recite the Quran. The Quran, you just say fi surat whatever, and you can read. You don't have to say bi sanad sahih or whatever. It's the Quran. It's been the authentication of it has occurred early on. Thousands of people, so it's written. There's really no need for this. But a hadith, they went through a different system of authentication and verification over history. So when we talk about them, we have to fill in these four blanks. For now, we just stick to 4. So Yarwi al-Imam, you have to point out who the scholar who authored the collection and added the hadith to it. Examples: Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, Ibn Majah. These are the ones who have. Those are the people who narrated the hadith and put them in collections with the chain of narration that they had back to the Prophet ﷺ. Those are the scholars who did that. And then you have to point out in the name of the fi and the name of the collection, because not all of their collections are equal. Like I said, Imam Bukhari has the Sahih, which is we know, but he also has Al-Adab al-Mufrad, which is a different book. Not every hadith in that book is authentic. He has different collections, so you have to know which collection this Imam actually put the book in. Like Imam Tirmidhi has his Jami' or his Sunan, and then he has the Shama'il, and they're different books in terms of the authenticity of the hadith within them. So you have to point out which collection he put them in, and also important because you have to know what collection was this hadith in. You can't just say Yarwi al-Imam kada. Where? Which collection did you see it in the collection of hadith that he put together? And then bisanad, and bisanad means with a chain of narration, and then you have to describe it: Sahih, Hasan, Da'if, or the different breakdowns of hadith authenticity. And the authenticity level is determined by a hadith scholar called a muhaqqiq, or an investigator. And hadith investigators are different than the scholars who did the hadith. And I will establish the difference for you throughout this course, inshallah, for sure. Examples is Imam al-Shirazi, al-Mundhiri, Sheikh Mahmoud Shakir, Sheikh al-Arnaout, Sheikh al-Albani. These are names of people who their job was to take the chain and take the hadith and investigate its authenticity. They're not narrators. They didn't narrate the hadith. They don't have a chain. Like, they don't have a chain of transmission like the guy like Imam Bukhari does. They just study the hadith and they make a judgment if it's authentic or not. When you use Imam Bukhari and Muslim, you don't need to say bi sanad sahih. It's known. But if you say Imam Bukhari in his Sahih or Imam Muslim in his Sahih, that is by default because their books have been authenticated over the last millennium 100 times, and it's agreed that everything there is authentic. If it's not authentic by its own self, it's authentic with evidence from other ahadith that are authentic. So you don't need to use that. But every other hadith and any other collection, you have to point out what sanad it has. Now, the 5th piece that I didn't add here is by saying, and which investigator called it out. right? On whose authority is it being called sahih or da'if? I don't need that from you for the purpose of this course, but that is something that is required. Because not all of them agree. Just because one investigator said it was da'if doesn't mean that the rest of the investigators agree to that, vice versa. So sometimes if it's a controversial hadith or a controversial chain of narration, you have to point out if there's a consensus or not. But I don't need that for this, for the sake of this. And I won't ask you to do a hadith where there's a lot of controversy on the authenticity of it. But you have to actually point out if it's hasan or it's controversial or da'if, who the investigator was. And then the sahabi, the person who actually is telling us what the Prophet ﷺ said or did, right? And here you put a companion narrator. So you see this very complicated diagram. This is just to show. Here on top is the Prophet ﷺ, and then Ubay ibn Ka'b. Ubay ibn Ka'b is the narrator that you put here. And then you have all these people. And then at the end here you have Imam Ahmad, Imam Muslim, Imam Abu Dawood, Imam Nasa'i. Those are the ones who have the collections. And they're the ones who count. They develop that chain of narration. The investigator studies these people and studies the authenticity of this chain of transmission that exists between Imam Nasa'i, for example, and Ubay ibn Ka'b. This is to understand how this all works. What I want you to do is to learn how to narrate a hadith, and that will be a part of the assignment. And once we launch it, or it goes live on the Google Classroom, you can read, you'll be assigned a hadith, and you'll be given instructions. And if you have questions, you can ask me throughout the sessions, inshallah ta'ala. Every hadith that we narrate at the Wellness Center is narrated in the exact same format, so you can just go back and listen to anyone narrating. We use exact same steps to narrate a hadith, and that's the right way to do it. Now you can do it in different ways, but you have to cover all 4 points, or 5 points if I'm being accurate. But if you don't do it this way, you're going to end up forgetting, because you'll have Rawahu Muslim at the end, you may forget to say that. So if you do it this way, you just end up covering all 4 points before you even start talking about the content of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It's nice to get the chain of transmission out of the way, so you can talk about the actual content of the hadith. So just for those who didn't attend last week. All right, so the hadith number 9 that we'll start with today. عن أبي هريرة عبد الرحمن بن صخر الدوسي رضي الله عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يقول ما نهيتكم عنه فاجتنبوه وما أمرتكم به فأتوا منه ما استطعتم فإنما أهلك الذين من قبلكم كثرة مسائلهم واختلافهم على أنبيائهم. So this hadith رواه الإمام بخاري والإمام مسلم هو حديث متفق عليه. So this is a well-known hadith as well. There's a lot of commentary around this hadith in different books, specifically books of fiqh and usul. This is a hadith that is considered one of the basic ahadith that are used to understand jurisprudence and the origins of jurisprudence, because it explains to us an important concept. So what he says here, alayhi salatu wasalam, مَا نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْهُ فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ. What I forbid you to do, you stay away from. Very concise language, very direct and very clear. What I tell you not to do, you completely stay away from. وَمَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِهِ فَأْتُوا مِنْهُ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. And what I command you to do, you do as much as you possibly can, right? As much as you can. And the difference of wording here is important because there's a difference of approach. When we use the word halal and we use the word haram. It's a different approach to these two concepts Islamically. Or when we talk about al-manhi anhu wal-ma'mur bihi, meaning that which is haram to do, which is you're forbidden to do or told not to do, versus the stuff that you're commanded to do or you're given an obligation to do. They're not exactly the same in terms of the consequences of breaking the law, one versus the other. They're a little bit different, and it's important to understand this difference because it makes it big, because it helps you understand why usuliyun came to certain conclusions when they studied or when they offered their methodology of evidence interpretation, or why fuqaha would give certain rulings. It's because they understand a simple law connected to this hadith. And then he explains alayhi salatu wasalam an extra piece, فَإِنَّمَا أَهْلَكَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ كَثْرَةُ مَسَائِلِهِمْ وَاخْتِلَافُهُمْ عَلَى أَنْبِيَائِهِمْ. And indeed, exclusively what caused the demise of the nations before you was the fact that they over-asked. I'll use that term because it's not that they asked, it's just they abused their right or their opportunity to ask their prophets, and then they argued a lot with them. Like they didn't take what was being said and run with it. They didn't understand how to deal with revelation. I don't have revelation. So you can ask as much as you want and you can argue as much as you want. But when you're speaking to someone who's offering you revelation, meaning they're offering you something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them, a piece of information that they're bringing to you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is Allah, something that's going to be seen as divine scripture or holy text, that's a different story. People who don't have that, like myself and everyone else who's alive today, this does not apply to. So this hadith is not something that can be taken and then extrapolated to how you deal with scholars today or with preachers or Islamic teachers or whatnot, because that's not what this hadith is talking about. This hadith is talking about specifically anbiya'ihim, their prophets, those who were speaking on divine authority. And they were bringing revelation to their followers or to the companions of their people. And there's a certain way to deal with that. So let's go through some of the commentary before, inshallah, we go for Salat al-Isha. So how does this hadith fit with the verse from Surah Al-Ma'idah? يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَسْأَلُوا عَنْ أَشْيَاءَ إِن تُبْدَ لَكُمْ تَسُؤْكُمْ وَإِن تَسْأَلُوا عَنْهَا حِينَ يُنَزَّلُ الْقُرْآنُ تُبْدَ لَكُمْ عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْهَا وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ حَلِيمٌ. So this ayah is in a really important verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah. Surah Al-Ma'idah has 15 commands, and this is one of them. Don't ask an ashya about things. In tubda lakum tasukum, if it is revealed to you, it will make your life difficult. It will bring you difficulty, or it will make you upset. And if you ask about it, when tas'alu anha, when the Quran is being revealed, حين ينزل القرآن تبدأ لكم, it will be revealed to you. Like if you push, you'll get an answer. عفى الله عنها. These issues, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, عفى عنها means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala consciously chose not to talk about. He chose not to bring them up. And then if you're going to go after it, you'll get an answer. And then you won't be happy with the answer, but you'll get it if you keep on asking about the question. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knowingly left it out. Wallahu ghafurun halim. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most forgiving and the most patient. This is an important verse in the Quran. And this hadith that we're looking at here, at least the second piece, I'll come back to the first piece inshallah in a moment, is there to help us with understanding it. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, as you know, would command the Sahaba and other parts of his sunnah not to ask questions. And they learned that after maybe a couple of years in Medina, and it became the norm that when they're sitting around him, alayhi salatu wasalam, they didn't come with all of their questions. They would listen and they would learn. And they would ask amongst each other, but they wouldn't necessarily ask him every detailed question. So they would love it when an Arabi walked into the masjid who knew nothing, who was not aware of this, and would just come up to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and ask whatever question he had. And the Prophet alayhi salatu would answer. He wouldn't preach to him that, no, you're not supposed to. No, he would answer him. So the Sahaba would all gather around to hear what it is that this Arabi was going to ask. But they weren't allowed to do it. And the reason being, if you think about it, if the Prophet ﷺ was alive today, how many questions do you have for him? How many questions does every Muslim have for him? It's ridiculous. It would be ridiculous. He would have no life. He'll never be able to sleep. And it'll just be on and go on and on. And you just question not one or two, you'll have like a million. So that's not going to work. Especially if he's going to be offering revelation alayhi salatu wasalam every time a question is being answered. So there was a system that was set up. We'll maybe inshallah pause. We'll pray Salat al-Isha, make sunnah, and then we'll go back to continue inshallah right after Salat al-Isha. Jazakumullah khair. Someone can make iqamah inshallah and we can pray.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. وجاءت سيارة قال يا بشرى هذا غلام وأسروه بضاعة والله عليم بما يعملون وشروه بثمن بخس دراهم معدودة وكانوا فيه من الزاهدين وقال الذي اشتراه من مصر لامرأته أكرمي مثواه عسى أن ينفعنا أو نتخذه ولدا وكذلك مكنا ليوسف في الأرض يتبوأ منها حيث يشاء ولنعلمه من تأويل الأحاديث والله غالب على أمره ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. ولما بلغ أشده آتيناه حكما وعلما وكذلك نجزي المحسنين وراودته التي هو في بيتها عن نفسه وغلقت الأبواب وقالت هيت لك قال معاذ الله إنه ربي أحسن مثواي إنه لا يفلح الظالمون ولقد همت به وهم بها لولا أن رأى برهان ربه كذلك لنصرف عنه السوء والفحشاء إنه من عبادنا المخلصين واستبق الباب وقدت قميصه من قبل وألف يا سيدها لدى الباب وقدت قميصه من دبر وألف يا سيدها لدى الباب قالت ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوءا إلا أن يسجن أو عذاب أليم قال هي راودتني عن نفسي وشهد شاهد من أهلها إن كان قميصه قد من قبل فصدقت وهو من الكاذبين وإن كان قميصه قد من دبر فكذبت وهو من الصادقين فلما رأى قميصه قد من دبر قال إنه من كيدكن إن كيدكن عظيم يوسف أعرض عن هذا واستغفري لذنبك إنك كنت من الخاطئين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. اللهم يا من هو لطيف بعبادك الطف بعبادك المسلمين في كل مكان. اللهم الطف بعبادك المسلمين في غزة. اللهم استر عوراتهم وآمن روعاتهم. اللهم استر عوراتهم وآمن روعاتهم. اللهم استر عوراتهم وآمن روعاتهم. اللهم أنزل سكينتك على قلوبهم. اللهم وأيدهم بجند من عندك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. واجعل كلمة الذين كفروا السفلى. اللهم وابر لأمة محمد أمر رشد يعز فيه أهل طاعتك ويذل فيه أهل معصيتك ويؤمر فيه بالمعروف وينهى فيه عن المنكر. صلى اللهم وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله بيته وصحبه أجمعين. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Inshallah, we'll continue lecture by Sheikh Hanan after the Subah prayer.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa sahbihi ajma'in. So inshallah, we'll continue at 7 moving forward, regardless of when Isha becomes. So if Isha goes to 7:30 later on, or we'll start at 7, we'll break for Isha, and then we'll continue. So that will be the plan. It's just so we can finish hopefully around 8:30, and we don't go beyond that, inshallah ta'ala, as much as possible. So I'll go back. I'll continue to what I was talking about before. So when we talk about this ayah, where it's a clear command that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving the believers not to ask about things that asking about will harm them. This is an important Islamic concept in general. Understanding the difference between asking questions to scholars and to Islamic speakers or to people who are capable of interpreting evidence versus asking questions to prophets or those who carry revelation. And the reason that is important to understand the difference is because of how Islam is designed to begin with. The Prophet ﷺ, if he were to answer every question, he's going to offer an answer that is the optimal one. That's what he's going to do every time, ﷺ. And that will make things very difficult for people to follow. And I'm going to explain to you where this exists within Islamic law so that you have some clarity on it. So you know the story of the cow, right? The story of Al-Baqarah, it exists in the largest surah in the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, and it's named after this story. The reason this story is so important is because it explains how Islam is going to work and how Bani Israel didn't understand how their faith was going to work as well when they made the mistake they made. When Musa alayhi salam told them, "Idbahu baqara," slaughter a cow, they went and they start asking a lot of questions. Well, what color? How big? How fat? How many kilo halib does it give every day? Where is it? What is its background? How old is it? They start asking all these questions. So he answered them. He offered them answers, and he gave them a description of an extremely difficult cow to find. So they spent, in some narrations, a year looking for this one cow, and they had to spend like a lot of money to buy this one cow so they can do it. However, had they slaughtered at the beginning any cow, now it turned out to be has to be a cow that is safra, has to be yellow. لا فارض ولا بكر, is neither too young or too old. مسلمة لا شية فيها, has no scars, has nothing, has no horns are broken, no ears not cut off. There's all these details. But if they found an aging, ill, green cow and they slaughtered it, it would have been fine. It would have sufficed, right? It would have sufficed. It would have been fine. But they didn't. They went after details that they didn't have to ask about. So they asked about them. They got the answer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them the optimal. Here's the best thing you can do. Here's the best thing you can do. Now that you're asking, you're stuck to it. Had they not asked the question and taken anything that was just a cow, as long as it wasn't a donkey, for example, or a horse, it would have sufficed. And this is the concept that the story of Al-Baqarah is explaining. Islam is not it's not a line, it's a river. Right? It's not a line, it's a river. There are banks to the river. Meaning at some point you can be outside of the river, somewhere on the shore. You can be outside of it. But it is a river, meaning you can be swimming in this lane here, and some other person is swimming in that lane over there. They're still inside the river. You may not be in the same lane, but you're still within Islam. And you may think that your lane is the one right in the middle, and they may think their lane is right in the middle. And it's hard to kind of figure out which one is the one that's in the middle, but as long as within the river, then it's still Islam. And that's how Islam works. It's designed that way. There's a lecture I give, it's called The Divine Design. This is how he designed Islam. He purposefully, subhanahu wa ta'ala, made it that way and told us, stop asking the Prophet ﷺ questions. Why? Because if you do, then he's going to give you very detailed answers. And then you're going to be stuck with that one answer. You can't leave it. But if you don't, then you get a generic description, a basic, and then scholars can take all of the evidence and then find methodologies to interpret it. And then you'll end up with difference of opinion, and then you'll have different things that can be doable and that are acceptable within Islam. Some of them will be better, some of them will be less optimal, but at least you have that openness. At least you have that ease that the ummah can benefit from. So the reason he told them, ﷺ, he gave this hadith is stop asking too much. The nations before you met their demise because they asked too much. They got answers and they could not keep up. They couldn't keep up anymore. A personal example, so you understand this in more detail, because Surah Al-Baqarah is the general example. A personal example is Abdullah ibn Umar. And he tells us about this. He said, he went to the Prophet ﷺ saying, how much do I read the Quran in? So he told him, in a month. Now he should have stuck with that, but he didn't. He said, I can do better. So he told him, then in every 10. He said, I can do better. He said, every 7. I can do better. He said, every 3, and nothing less than 3. So he stuck with 3. And then he got old. And he said, لَيْتَنِي أَخَذْتُ بِرُخْصَةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. I wish I listened to him at the beginning. And he just stuck to the month. Now I'm personally, because he took that from the Prophet, it's hard for him to, wallahi, break the Prophet ﷺ direct command to him, which is the agreement of 3. So he kept on doing it every 3 until he died, which is very hard for him. It doesn't apply to us, but apply to him. But the concept here is important. There's a reason why he said يَتَرَبَّصْنَ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوء. There's a reason that he used that word, where it could be understood as tuhurat, as time of purity, or hayda, time of menstruation. He used that word purposefully, not so to confuse you, so that there can be different interpretations, so we can end up with different rulings, so people can take that which is of ease for them, so that there's more than one lane within this deen, so we're not stuck to one answer. When it's one answer, it becomes very hard. There are some things that have one answer, for sure. There are values and principles and certain things within Islam that is one, this is it. La ilaha illallah, that's it. There's no interpretation here. Muhammad Rasulullah, iqam as-salah, ita az-zakah. A couple of things are clear in terms of the concept. There's really no way, there's no room. It was designed that way. But everything else, purposefully, he says subhanahu wa ta'ala, afa Allahu anha. That's what the ayah says. Afa Allahu anha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forgiven it. He's not going to make it one answer. He's going to keep it open. Then scholars will go, take evidence, interpret, and come up with the different options that are acceptable, that are permissible, based on evidence interpretation, based on language. That's what they're going to do. That's why not everyone can do this. You have to have the proper background to be able to do that. But that's why it's by design that way. It's not, I think that's all I said. And here's a breakdown that I offer. If you attended the Usul al-Fiqh course that I gave, this is a really important slide for you to understand. This is how law works within Islam. Usul al-Fiqh is basically equivalent to what we would call in a country the constitution, right? When they use the word constitution, that's kind of usul al-fiqh for us. And then law, when you go to study law, you're studying qawa'id al-shar'iyyah. You're studying the base. You're studying the ideas that you're going to use to make arguments in a court of law. That's what law is. It gives you the rules that you're going to use. And then individual rulings or verdicts, that's what fiqh is. So you've ever heard, sometimes in a court of law, they'll say, well, based on something versus something, or someone versus someone, they're using a specific case that was argued and someone won. They'll use that as a basis to make their argument. They're using an individual verdict that was made to make an argument, but that's not always the case in a court of law. They use the qawa'id. So this is how it works in Islam. There's a way of evidence being interpreted. You have to understand the methodology of interpretation of usul al-fiqh, then you have to have the laws that you're going to use, and then you're going to come up with the rulings. It's designed to be like that. That's how the Prophet ﷺ taught us to do this, and that's why we have scholars who continue to do it. And if you decide at some point that that's not the case, some people at some point in our history decided, no, there's one answer for everything. There's one answer for everything. And it's either my way or the highway. And then you ended up with a big problem. It doesn't work. Even they couldn't stick to it. Even those who decided that that's how Islam is going to be, they couldn't stick to it. It's impossible. It's designed not to be that way. How do we know that? The Quran points it out, and the Prophet ﷺ said it. He said it in this beautiful hadith that we're studying here today. فَإِنَّمَا أَهْلَكَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ كَاثْرَةُ مَسَائِلِهِمْ وَاخْتِلَافِهِمْ عَلَى أَنْبِيَائِهِمْ. So what was his basic idea, alayhi salatu wasalam, though? Since I started with the second piece of, we'll come to this maybe in a second. So how did he, alayhi salatu wasalam, start this hadith? He started this hadith in a way to make the second part that we just studied understandable. He said, what I tell you not to do, you stay away from. And what I command you to do your best at achieving it. And then don't ask too much, because those of you, the nations before you, they asked a lot and it caused their demise. So he gave us the rule. He said, when it comes to what I tell you not to do, that red line is sacred. You do not cross that red line. Right? Don't debate it, don't negotiate it, don't think about it, just stay away. We studied that in a few hadith before, where in the hadith where he said, halalu bayyin wa haramu bayyin, go back to that lecture. And we talked about how the Prophet ﷺ taught us that you stay away, as far away as possible from where haram is, so that you don't end up, one of your sheep go there. You slip and you make a mistake, you stay, because you have to stay away from the haram. And because of that, from this hadith, we understand that if someone has to make a choice, and of course there's no such choice, but if you had to, between staying away from something that is haram versus doing something that's obligatory, yeah, then you choose to stay away from the thing that's haram. That's a priority. That's more important. It's way more important. Now, obviously, if you don't do salah, you don't do zakah, you're at fault for that. But if the alternative is you're going to go ahead and fall into haram, no, then that's a priority to stay away from. And from this, we have a qa'idah shar'iyyah. We actually have, when I pointed out in this example, we have a law. What is the law? دَفْعُ الضَّرَرْ مُقَدَّمٌ عَلَى جَلْبِ الْمَصْلَحَةِ. Negating harm is prioritized over bringing benefit. Because when you do what you're being told to do, that brings benefit to you and those around you. When you stay away from something that's haram, you basically protect yourself from harm and others around you from harm. And this is prioritized over this. Now, we want both. I'm not here to argue that we want one and not the other. We want both. But if for some reason, for some weird scenario, you have to choose, then this is what is prioritized. You stay away from that which is haram. That's why scholars and lawmakers Islamically in history, if they ran into someone يقيم الصلاة ويصوم رمضان لكن يقع في الفواحش, someone who prays and fasts but they fall into fawahish, and someone else يقصر في الصلاة, does not pray very often nor fast, لكن sharif, they use the word sharif, or صاحب مروءة, he has مروءة, I mean this person does not fall into fawahish, هذا خير من هذا, this is better. This is better. This person may not be doing all the things they should do, but they're staying away from the things that they had to stay away from. Staying away from zina, way more important than following some of the rulings within our deen. Staying away from khamr, staying away from kadhib, staying away from harm, because it's harm. This is what he's explaining to us, meaning when he told us stop asking, he did it by giving us a basic rule. Here's a basic rule. If you invest your time in staying away from the red lines, and then do as much as possible from the good stuff. And don't come and ask me all the details about the good stuff. Should I do it like this? I remember I was sitting with Shaykh Muhammad Awad, in Medina. I was maybe 7. He was a gentleman who was removed from Syria in the 80s. And when I went to Medina in the 90s as a kid, he was still there. And I got to know him, and he was a very knowledgeable alim, and he helped me a lot when I was a kid. He came back, by the way, into Syria in the early 2000s, after maybe like 25 years where he was. So he came to Jami' Zayd and he gave a talk. So he sat and he spoke, and he was speaking for an hour. And after an hour, people started to get tired. Because he said, what? شو تعبتوا؟ 30 سنة ما حكيت بدكم تسمعوا. He said, hey, for 30 years I've been quiet. I'm going to speak. You're going to listen. So he went on for another hour. He spoke for 2 years. SubhanAllah, he passed away within a year of coming back to Saudi. Anyways, I was sitting beside him in Medina, and people came to him and said, yeah, when we pray, you put your hand like this, or like this, or you like this, or you put it like this. He said, put your hand in your pocket, but make sure your heart is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in prayer. So now there are rulings in terms of where you should put your hand, and these rulings are important. But when the nitty-gritty of this aspect of Islam becomes prioritized over the bigger picture, it becomes a problem. When you fall into details and you miss the bigger picture, you don't know what the bigger picture is, or you're falling into, if you're focused on details of acts of worship, yet there's a big act of haram that continues to occur in your life, then you have completely misunderstood what this whole story is about. That's not how this works. You have to focus on, you have to know how to prioritize. So these details, you may have the luxury at some point in your life to focus on. Most people don't. I actually don't think anyone does. I don't think anyone is in a state of iman and ihsan and qurb min Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they have negated all of the haram to have time to focus on all the details that they are doing and others are doing. I just don't think that's the case. Scholars have to focus on these details to fill the books of fiqh so that you have rulings available to you when you study and you take a course and you learn something. But as a person, you have to understand that no, I should be focusing on the big. What am I making big mistakes? Am I crossing a red line? And you have to keep yourself in check as you go along. And it's just a beautiful concept that he explained, alayhi salatu wasalam. And there's a lot within it for us, as an ummah, to understand. So that's kind of the third question, or the second question. The third question, how does he pave the way for disciplines such as fiqh and usul fiqh? I can explain that a little bit. Let's talk about evidence, though, for you for a second, just so you understand what I'm trying to explain, in case this is becoming complicated. If it is complicated, good, then go and attend the usul fiqh course, and then you'll understand that it's not that complicated. But I'll give you a basic idea. So evidence is classified in Islam. There's 3 different classifications for evidence when we talk about evidence. The Prophet ﷺ gave a basic idea. He explained. صلوا كما رأيتموني أصلي. Pray like I do. That's it. No more questions. Just watch and then do it. Purposefully, he didn't sit there and bullet point 1 and bullet point 2 and make it and make sure everyone. He purposefully did not do it that way. He could have done it, he didn't. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have put it in the Quran, he did not. So this purposefully that wasn't done that way. Why? So that we would have a system, a way to build our law as Muslims, and a law that would have different rulings and would have that river that allows you to do different things and you're still within that river. And if you're looking for the best thing, you can find it. If you're doing what is convenient because you're finding difficulty, that's fine as well, as long as you're within the river. But that only works if Muslims understand how law works and how evidence works. And if you don't, then that's why you're not going to know how to deal with this stuff. You're going to read an ayah or read a hadith, and then you're going to be taken by the literal meaning of it or what you understood from it, and then go around and you can tell everyone that you haven't studied the whole issue in depth. When you're going to study any issue, you have to take all of the pieces of evidence that surround or that address it. And pieces of evidence have different categories. So first of all, you have to ask about the sanctity, the weight. Is this piece of evidence holy? Is it sacred? Is it revelation? Or is it respected? Like, is it something a Sahabi said? A alim said? A tabi'i said? No? Is it something the Prophet ﷺ did as a habit? Because that's not sacred. Or is it holy text? Is it قال Allah, قال Rasulullah alayhi wasallam? Right? So you have to differentiate first of all because they're not the same weight. They're not the same weight. And then even within, you have to know, that's the first one. Is it sacred? Is it divine? Or is it respected? A respected piece of evidence that we have. It doesn't mean that I'm not saying this is not evidence. It's evidence. It's just not the same weight. It's just different. You should go attend a court hearing at some point. So you understand that they used different pieces of evidence. Just because the evidence is weak doesn't mean it's not evidence. You just have to understand that it's not exactly the same. And sometimes you have a lot of weak pieces of evidence and one strong piece of evidence, and sometimes they'll balance out, and sometimes they'll be heavier, and there's different ways to establish doubt or establish certainty. Then you have to ask about authenticity. Is the authenticity of this piece of evidence, is it definite or is it probabilistic? Quran, definite. Everything else aside from the Quran is probabilistic with different degrees. Maybe some ahadith that are mutawatir, that came to us through, which we'll talk about mutawatir inshallah in a few sessions. Meaning they came to us through multiple people in each level of the chain of transmission. We can say this is definite authenticity, but most ahadith and most narrations that we have in our deen are probabilistic. But the Quran, for example, is definite. There's no probabilistic, there's no ayah that is hasana or sahiha or da'ifa. It's all indefinite. And then the third piece is indication. What is it saying? Is the indication of the wording of this piece of evidence definite or is it probabilistic? Is it clear? فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Clear, there's nothing to interpret here. You can't take out two out of this verse no matter how you spin it. Or is it يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوء? And the word quru is a probabilistic indication. It could mean this, it could mean that. So when you take any piece of evidence, you have to say, is it holy? What's its sanctity? What's its authenticity? What's its indication? And then based on that, we'll have ranks of evidence. You have A and B and C and D and E. A will be sacred evidence with definite authenticity and definite indication, right? Right off the top, that first row. Rank A. Rank B will be maybe something full sanctity, full authenticity, probabilistic meaning. And then as you make the changes, you end up with rank C and D and E. It doesn't mean that rank F and G and H aren't evidence. No, they're evidence. And studying usul al-fiqh allows you to understand that amal ahl al-kitab wa man kana qablana, it's evidence. What the faiths before us did is evidence. I'm not saying it's rank A evidence, but it's evidence. And someone who knows how to argue evidence will bring it into the discussion and add all the evidence together. So yes, that's how we come to rulings in Islam. So don't be a single piece of evidence sniper. Don't read one thing and decide that that's the thing you're going to tell everyone. You have to know what this is. Have you studied this in that depth? You understand all the pieces of evidence. And you understand all of the probabilistic indications of what's being said. You don't? Then maybe take a pill and chill. Just هدي حالك شوي. Take it easy. Look into it a little bit more. Listen a little bit more. If we do that, then we're able to prioritize, and then we can be very, very definitive when needed. You see, if we treat all issues with the same degree of definity, then everything loses its priority. It's like if your child, if you slap them when they lie and you slap them when they break a cup, they don't know the difference between this and that. They don't know which is more of a problem. They'll think that lying and breaking China is the same. They're not the same thing. This is a problem. This is no big deal. You're going to break a lot of them throughout your life. It doesn't matter. Clean it up and move on. But this is a problem. So how do you do this? In Islam, that system is there. So tawheed, right? The values of sidq and amana and ikhlas. These are things we defend. We stand by. We live by. There's no arguing this piece. We don't cause harm. Period. We don't harm ourselves. We don't harm others. Period. But then there's other stuff that there's room. There's room. Take it easy. It's no problem. So he made iqamah on the Hanafi way, and he did he did hayya ala salati, hayya ala salat twice. So what? The message is not going to fall down. We'll survive. We'll survive this iqamah that sounds a little bit different. It's not a problem. It's understanding where there's definitive evidence and where there isn't, and how to kind of rank all that. And that's not the point of this course, but this hadith is one of the hadith that paved the way for Muslims, later for scholars to understand, and for the Sahaba to understand. Oh, okay. Meaning this is purposeful, Ya Rasulullah. It's not that you're just bored and tired of us asking you questions. He's actually doing it for their sake and for our sake. Alayhi salatu wasalam. Look, he purposefully left it open. Scholars will later on come to conclusions. Scholars will later on look into it and figure it out and explain to us what we need to do. And tell us where there is space and there's flexibility and where there isn't. And that's the beauty of our law. And it's actually something very, very impressive. And I broke down what the hadith looks like. You can read this slide on your own time, inshallah ta'ala. So as long as the evidence is being used logically, difference of opinion is the ease of Islam. All right? So as long as evidence is being used logically, then whatever difference of opinion you walk away with, that's ease. That's the ease. It's ease. Ikhtilaf is ease if that's the case. If we're taking evidence and we're dealing with it logically. We're looking, there's rank A, B, and C, and we're setting up together, and we're taking the evidence that makes more sense, or we're making an argument with evidence that makes sense. With taking into consideration other pieces of evidence as well. And you think, it should be then straightforward, we should come to the same conclusion every time. No, you don't. It doesn't exist in Islam, it doesn't exist anywhere, by the way. In science, it doesn't exist. If you're a person of science and you're within a discipline, there's always new trials coming out. There's always new discoveries or new hypotheses, and people will take evidence and they'll argue it back and forth in different ways, coming to different conclusions every time they make those different arguments. As long as they're making logical arguments, as long as they're not doing something that has no rationale to it whatsoever, then this is science. It's when you decide that you're not going to follow logic anymore or rationale, or you're going to base it on whim and desire. That's a whole different story. So just something for you to, inshallah, take time and think about. All right, hadith number 10. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم. So this is a long hadith, but it's important. إن الله طيب لا يقبل إلا طيبا وإن الله أمر المؤمنين بما أمر به المرسلين فقال تعالى يا أيها الرسل كلوا من الطيبات واعملوا صالحا وقال تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا كلوا من طيبات ما رزقناكم ثم ذكر الرجل يطيل السفر أشعث أغبر يمد يديه إلى السماء يا رب يا رب ومطعمه حرام ومشربه حرام وملبسه حرام وغذي بالحرام فأنى يستجاب له رواه مسلم. So this is a beautiful hadith, and many of you I'm sure have heard parts of it, if not the whole thing, multiple times before. So what is it saying? The Prophet ﷺ says, indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is tayyib. So tayyib and tib and tuba and taba, these are words, this is a word that has multiple meanings in Arabic actually, which makes it difficult to translate. And to use the word good is all right. It's not great though. It's not accurate. It's not perfectly accurate when you say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is good. Tayyib means something that is pure. That is pure. And that looks for purity. That is the concept of tiba. That's why you say fatuba lahum, right? Fatuba lahum. Tuba is taken from the same root for the people, believers on the Day of Judgment. Tuba lahum, and that's nothing to do with a block or anything. It has to do with purity, meaning that where they're going to is a place of purity, a place of khayr, of goodness, right? So that's where they may take the concept of good here for. And the same thing in من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة. Those who believe and do good deeds, and Allah, male or female, we will grant them hayatan tayyibah, a life that is functional, a life that has purity to it, a life that has purposefulness. That's all the concepts of tayyib. So in Allah tayyib doesn't mean just good. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one who is pure, who wants others to be pure, who looks for those who will be functional. That's the concept of tayyib. لا يقبل إلا طيبة. He only accepts things that are done with that premise. He only accepts things that are done with an intention that has purity in it, that is functional, that is serving a purpose, that has the proper parameters. إن الله أمر المؤمنين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the believers with the same thing he commanded the prophets. So what did he command the prophets? He said, يا أيها الرسل كلوا من الطيبات. Oh my prophets or messengers, eat from الطيبات. Eat from things that are defined as tayyib, as pure, as purposeful, as functional. وَاعْمَلُوا صَالِحًا, and do good deeds. And then he told the believers, يا أيها الذين آمنوا, oh those who believe, كلوا من طيبات ما رزقناكم. Eat that which is pure from what we provided you with. Meaning that not everything on earth is going to have that purity. Some things will not, and some things will not be functional. In the continuation of the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَاشْكُرُوا لِلَّهِ, and show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he went beyond that, alayhi salatu wasalam, to explain better. The hadith is not two pieces, it's one piece, it's just the second piece explained the first piece. And he talked about الرجل, a man, يطيل السفر, someone who is traveling for a long time. He wanted to give an example, and so he gave the example through the following. He said, imagine a guy who is traveling for a long time. And of course, when you say traveling for a long time back then, you brought out a lot of empathy from the hearts of people listening to the story, because traveling sucked back then. It was very hard to go from one place to the other. If you're traveling for a long time, you were under the sun in the desert, you were sweaty, you were hungry, you were scared, you were tired. You're not in first class Air Canada going from one place to the other, enjoying your hotel stay away from the kids and everything. So it's not something positive as it is today. It was a very difficult endeavor back then. So he's telling them about someone who he wants them to feel a bit empathetic towards. يُطِلُ السَّفَرِ أَشْعَث أَغْبَرْ. Ash'ath means someone who is disheveled, and أغبر, someone who has dust. Ash'ath means his hair is all over the place. Yeah, he hasn't combed his hair in a long time, hasn't had a shower. أغبر meaning he's covered with dust. يَمُدُّ يَدَيْهِ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ. He's putting his hands to the sky. He's drawing this picture for you. Imagine someone who's been traveling for a long time. He's disheveled, he's dusty, he's tired, his hands are he's saying, Ya Rab, Ya Rab. He's making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whenever someone is in that position, meaning they are in a position of humility, not just in the heart, but also in the appearance. So they are tired, they're scared, they're hungry. Things aren't going well for them. And they're saying, Ya Rab, Ya Rab. And they're asking, you think that this is a good moment for them for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to throw them a lifeline. But then he says, وَمَطْعَمُهُ haram. But all that when he eats his food, he takes it from a source that's haram. وَمَشْرَبُهُ haram. And he brings the water that he drinks from a source that's haram. وَمَلْبَسُهُ haram. And he gets his clothing from a source that's haram. وَغُذِّيَ بِالْحَرَامِ. And all his life he was fed haram. فَأَنَّ يُسْتَجَابُ لَهُ. How is this person going to find acceptance of his dua? How is this person going to find their dua accepted if they don't? So he explained, alayhi salatu wasalam, what he meant by tayyib. There has to be purity to it. If you stand there and your heart is in a state of humility, Ya Rab, Ya Rab, but for years, the source of your income was haram. You didn't care. So you ate haram, you drank haram, you wore haram, and what are you hoping for? You can't, that's not how this works. Why? Because in Allah tayyib. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pure. And He's good. And He only accepts that which comes from a source that is similar to it. And if you don't bring it that way, He's not listening to it. And He's telling you what He told the prophets. Eat from al-tayyibat, from halal. Make sure that it's pure. Make sure that and the purity here is not purity of substance, it's purity of essence. I'm not talking about, you can make food that's from different things, but it has to be, all of them have to be, the purity is the halal piece, that is coming from a source that there's no oppression and there's no red lines that are being crossed. And this is important to understand. It is very, very important. So what is the significance of the man's description of being disheveled and dusty? Is that this person is in a moment of being extremely broken and humiliated, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You would think that this is the right time for this person to have their dua accepted, but then it's not. Based on that there's something that this person did not think about, did not take care of, did not show interest in, so they ended up in a bad situation. وَذِيَ بِالْحَرَامِ. It was too much haram in their life, so they don't get anything. It's a scary concept, wallahi. another hadith that's much shorter than this one. It doesn't exist in the collection of Imam Nawawi, in the Arba'in Nawawi, but it's authentic. And the Prophet ﷺ would say to Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, أطب مطعمك تستجب دعوتك. أطب مطعمك. He used the word, the same word. He said أطب, from طابة, from طيب. أطب, make sure that your مطعمك, your food. أطب, make it طيب, make it halal, make it pure. تستجب دعوتك, and your dua will be accepted. And Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas took that to heart, and he was mustajab ad-da'wah. He was, rahmatullah alayhi, radiyallahu anhu, he was someone who would make dua for people, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would grant them that which he supplicated for. Because he was very particular when it came to that. Now, so how do we define mal haram, or unlawful wealth? Because this is a big part of understanding Islamic law. Now, if you understood the hadith before, you're getting why these hadith, there's I won't say a secret, but there is a logical continuity to these ahadith, the sequence of these ahadith when Imam Nawawi put them together. There's something there, and I hope that through these explanations you're seeing how they're connected one to the other. So he just told us the hadith before. ما نهيتكم عنه فاجتنبوا. What I tell you not to do, you stay away from. وما أمرتكم به فأتوا منه ما استطعتم. And what I command you to do the best you can in terms of achieving that. So this is a good example. ما الحرام. You were told to stay away from a source of income that is haram. Stay away from that. That's one of those lines. You stay away from that as much as possible, and then everything else is, even if you have less, you can't take care of your family as well, or you're not able to give as much sadaqah. These are all good things. You want to give sadaqah, you want to give, don't eat haram. Start there. Prioritize that, and then if you make money from halal later on, go ahead, give zakah and give sadaqah and build sadaqah jariyah and build hospitals, but make sure you don't bring money that's haram. That's the first thing you do. If you don't understand that piece and you make money, do it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The unlawful wealth, it's a big deal. I get this question a lot. There is no answer. Someone who built their empire from haram, I have no answer for you. Like, what can I do to make, I don't know. Well, how do I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea. Wallahi, no clue. You tell me that, you make me scared, you make me feel very bad for you, I don't know what to tell you. You built all this wealth from haram, I don't know what to tell you. There's no magic thing to do to fix it. That's why this has to be established early on in life, and it's one of those red lines that you have to learn to stay away from. You don't take mal haram. You don't take something that's not yours. You don't accept wealth that you shouldn't accept. You shouldn't make money from a way. And if people ask, like, is this okay? This okay? We'll offer the best answers we have. But let me tell you this: if you're uncertain, it's your life. This is your mal, and this is your future, and this is your present as well. Maybe stay away. Maybe consider not taking a risk on making money from a source or a background that's questionable. That you had to ask a few shuyukh and they had to think about it for a while and then give you what they make sense to them, or just for your own sake. I mean, I'm not saying that you can make a lot. Like I said, I'll show you the algorithm. If you thought about it and you listen to the evidence, you listen to the arguments, and it makes sense to you, you can go ahead. But if you're uncertain after a lot of research, then this is mal haram. This is unlawful wealth. If it comes through dhulm, if it comes through oppression, if it comes through, which is the biggest piece, if it's come through some way of harming others, if it comes through cheating people, if it comes through misrepresentation, these are big ones. If it comes through lack of transparency with what you're doing, if it comes in the form of taking advantage of others, abusing the fact that you have a monopoly or you have the ability to strong arm people. These are scary ways. And the Prophet ﷺ was very clear on these things, and Sahaba were as well. And he gave this example. This example, that if you understand the hadith, is a very scary one. Because رَجُل أَشْعَثْ أَغْبَرْ يُطِيلُ السَّفَرْ, with his hands to the sky, he's saying, Ya Rabb, Allah will listen. Allah will 100% hear him. But then the hadith said, فَمَطْعَمُهُ حَرَامٌ وَمَشْرَبُهُ حَرَامٌ وَمَلْبَسُهُ حَرَامٌ فَأَنَّى يُسْتَجَابُ لَهُ. How can he be responded to? How can you say that he's not going to be responded to? Which is very scary. It's very scary. Because that's not what we're taught, right? We're not taught that piece. We're taught that whenever you supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He responds to you. He accepts your supplication. He may not give you what you want immediately. That's not response or acceptance of supplication, by the way. It's a different topic altogether. But He'll respond to you. But then this hadith is saying, well, not all the time, no. Sometimes He won't respond to you. And then He gave the example. مطعمه حرام ملبسه حرام مشربه حرام غذي بالحرام. And why? But why is that the case? Because inna Allah tayyib la yaqbalu illa tayyiba. He is pure, he only accepts that which is pure. Which brings us to the, I think we talked about, we'll talk about the third question in a second. Bring us to do the ends justify the means? That's what tayyib actually means at the end. If you want to summarize this whole hadith, this is what he's explaining. The ends don't justify the means. To make mal haram with the intention of using it to build hospitals and take care of people doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not accept it because it came from haram, so it's not going to be looked at that way. This is very important. The ends never justify the means in Islam, ever. Ever. There is not one example. This is a undisputed law within our deen. That if you're going to do something right, the method of doing it has to be right. Meaning you have to take the path that is also correct and right. There's no exception to this. It doesn't matter what situation you're in. It doesn't matter what you're up against. It doesn't. Just because the goal is noble and holy doesn't mean that you can use twisted ways to get there. You cannot. Why? Because inna Allah tayyib. La yaqbalu illa tayyiba. He only accepts that what comes from pure sources. He will not look at anything else. And that's important to think about because we're living in a time where that's hard to fathom. It's hard to fathom. If not literally impossible to do so. But it has to be understood. As a Muslim, you just don't accept that. You will not use crooked manners to get somewhere and then say, well, I'm doing it for the sake of Allah. I'm going to take it all and donate it or use it for... No. Things don't work that way. The third question that I put there, do we consider Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having the name Tayyib? So if you take the 99 names, can you call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala At-Tayyib, right? Based on the hadith, Inna Allah Tayyibun, right? So this is an interesting topic. And I spent a good part of my youth studying Asma al-Husna in a lot of depth. And by the way, there isn't agreement on the 99. And the word 99 does not necessarily mean a number. It's more of the way the Arab it's a way the Arab would use to say that there's many. Yeah, that's how, if you come from an Arabic country, you'll know that certain numbers are used to describe certain things. So when you say 60, that's usually a bad thing. 70 usually means working hard. 99 usually means infinity. Like different words, different numbers have different meanings based on that. 7 means continuity. There's actually symbolism in the numbers that are used in the Quran and the Arabs that when they use these numbers. So 99 doesn't actually mean exactly 99, and there's no agreement on that. But you can't, and I broke down, this is a really nice slide. I'm going to be using it inshallah this Ramadan for the after Fajr halaqa. We're going to go through this. It's a nice slide because here's the categories of the asma of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're categorized into groups, meaning the names, there's an umbrella name in each group and other names under it, like Al-Alim is the umbrella name of omniscient. And then you have Al-Khabir and Al-Latif and Al-Sami' and Al-Basir. They're similar, but they're specific. They specify the meaning. So that's how his name subhanahu wa ta'ala work. But you can't take At-Tayyib as a meaning, as a name, well, because you need certain sources of evidence for a name to be used for a description of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be used as a name. So first of all, there has to be a place in the Quran where it's used as a name, not a description. And there has to be a place in the Sahih Sunnah, in the Sunnah that is authentic, that is where it's used as a name, not as a description. And here, we don't have, this is the only hadith that we have it, and we don't have it used as a name. We have it as a description. Inna Allah tayyib. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pure. But we don't have that He is al-tayyib. I mean, that specification does not exist in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ or in the Quran anywhere else. So scholars would hold back and say, this is not a name, this is a description. And then they further describe that or verify that through the continuation of the hadith. لا يقبل إلا طيب. You only accept that with pure. And then in the example that is given within the hadith, explain that this is more of a description than it is a name for him subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there are ways for us to define whether a word, a description is going to be used as a name versus not. So not every time there's a description you can just use it as a name. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. So be careful before, if you hear a description, can it be used as a name or not? You have to go and look. Right. So for example, a good example is when and I think I put it here somewhere. Where is it? So for example, a name of Dar, the one who brings harm. The only way you can use that name is if you use it with a nafi'. It has to come together. And nafi'u dar, the one who brings benefit, the one who brings harm. You can't use it on its own. Now we break it down here for the purposes of the categorizations for it to be clear for you. But in terms of speech, when you use a name, certain names have to come together. They can't actually come alone. You can't use one name without using the other. You have to use the name in combination with another name that bring that same meaning. All right. Here's a nice jurisprudence rule to explain what we just talked about, and we'll end with that, inshallah. ما بني على باطل فهو باطل. What is built on falsehood is false. So if your empire, your financial empire is built on falsehood, on haram, then it's false. No matter what it does, no matter what it's used to build, it's false. Now, let's say someone donates money to you, and you know the origin of the money is haram. You can take it. Once it's yours, once it's in your hands, and it's not false for you, it's false for them. It's false for them, not for you. So you take it, now that's with you, you're using it for halal. You took it from, you didn't steal it from this person. It was offered to you as donation. You use it, so you got it from a halal source. So for you, it's not batil. For them, it is. Understand the difference? So this poor person is laundering money in the wrong way. He's laundering money the opposite way. He's bringing it haram, and then he's giving it to others. It's halal to everyone else, and it continues to be haram for him. He gets nothing out of it. It's a very, very scary and very, very sad thing when someone takes mal haram and does not understand the consequences of doing so. So it's something worth it. And this is an example of, since we talked a little bit today about qaida fiqhiyya, qaida shar'iyya, about laws, this is a law. When scholars are making arguments within fiqh, this is one of their laws. Something that is built on batil is batil. And this is not just a religious law, by the way. It's a philosophical law that is universally accepted outside of the realms of religion and faith altogether. So I'll end with that, inshallah ta'ala. I hope that was a benefit to you. Inshallah, I will launch the first assignment this weekend. We're just fixing, we just put out asking who is a credit student, and we're just waiting for everyone to respond so I know what the numbers are. And then we'll assign everyone a hadith, and we'll give instructions on what to do, and then that'll be around 20% of the mark of this course. We'll be just doing that one assignment, which is learning to narrate a hadith appropriately. And there'll be another assignment probably in a few more weeks that'll be written, and then the exam will happen after Ramadan, inshallah ta'ala, so towards the end of April, so you have a long time. All of my exams are open book. They're based on you taking notes and learning and understanding what's being explained. And a lot of them will come just from the commentary. I'll just ask the question that I just asked here and ask you to see if you understood. I'm more interested in your comprehension than your regurgitation. I don't care about you memorizing stuff as much as I care about you understanding what we're talking about and having and building an appropriate comprehension of these topics. So if you need to listen to these lectures more than once and ask questions and think about it, that's fine. A part of the assignment for this course will be memorizing 6 ahadith. Just for the benefit for yourself. You get to choose them. So you can choose, there's actually 6 short ones. I choose the number 6 because there's 6 short ones here. So you can just take 6 short ones and memorize them, even if you can't do that. And if you fail to do that, you can do less. I'm not a dictator. You can talk to me if you can't get 5 done because Arabic is hard. We can break it down for you. But it's for your own benefit to have like 6 hadith that are memorized from his collection, rahmatullah alayh, to carry with you in your life, inshallah. And especially if a hadith meant something to you. Like if you listen to a hadith and like, I love that one, that made sense to me, or you pick something up, memorize it. Know where it's narrated. Be able to say who the Sahabi is, who just know who it is, so you can convey it and transmit it appropriately. Inshallah ta'ala. But I'll end with that. Subhanallah bihamdihi la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad alayhi salatu jazakumullahu khair barakallahu fikum. I am around for a few minutes for questions if there are. Otherwise, people are welcome to leave, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum.